Today's guest is Ellen Hoffman from Oasis Senior Advisors, and thank you for coming back to join us again.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So maybe start off for our listeners that are unfamiliar. Could you describe kind of an overview of Oasis Senior Advisors before we get to today's topic?
Absolutely. Oasis Senior Advisors is a free service to help people find safer housing and care options. And we are a free service. Excuse me. We're a free service, but in full disclosure, how we do get paid is if we help you find a community and you choose that community, the community will pay us a one-time fee. My wife and I have been owner-operators of Oasis Senior Advisors for 5 years. She's a registered nurse, and I'm a certified senior advisor, which means I have ongoing training and education. And we love what we do. We love the personal approach that we provide to our clients.
And your wife's first name is
Leanne.
Leanne, yes. Yeah. Very nice lady. Yeah.
It's good to have you back, Alan. You know, one of the things that impresses me, and as everybody knows, we have coffee beforehand, is your passion and your honesty for helping people. So it's just good to have people like you out in the marketplace helping guide them, because it's a very big maze. In the senior care is a very big maze.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And maybe interesting for your listeners to know that my wife is a caregiver for her mom, who's 90 years old, lives in Plainfield. While Marianne is totally independent, she doesn't drive, and so we help her in that capacity. And I'm also power of attorney for my aunt who lives down in Champaign. And even though I'm in the business, I absolutely have no credibility with her. She still sticks her tongue out at me. So I understand, firsthand how a family member can be received when you're trying to help a loved one who needs care. And then I also see the business side of it. And often it's funny at times to see how a family member will ask us, can you have this conversation with mom and dad because they won't listen to me? So there is humor in this business as well.
Absolutely. And I'm going to call you over next time I suggest things to my wife. So
we'll give it a try.
The first topic today, what we'd like to talk about is couples that want to stay together. If one spouse needs care and the other spouse is independent, are there housing options for both?
Yeah, and this is a subject that seems to have presented itself to us quite often this year. And whether it's the couple who's asking the question or the siblings or other family members, the goal is always, to stay together. So there are several options out there. And I guess one of the other things I would mention is if you have private pay assets or long-term care insurance, your options are much easier, and also there are more out there. But for the situation where one spouse, I would say, is well, and the other spouse might have a condition, there's always independent living options. Generally, rent is cheaper at independent living communities. And then, as you guys are well aware, how we explain it to people is you have this independent apartment, and then generally you would hire in-home care for the spouse that needs additional care. And so that's one option. Then there's always the assisted living communities where the well spouse can be taken care of by the staff there. But one of the challenges can be that the well spouse may find an assisted living community socially a little more challenging. Mm-hmm. I know what we have found in the last 5 years is that people who call us generally are sicker, they've waited longer, they're staying in their homes much longer, which we're totally supportive of, but it generally is more of a crisis. So when you go into an assisted living community, often they look like skilled nursing. You'll see a lot of people in wheelchairs and walkers. Even 5 years ago, I would comment that assisted living communities were a little livelier, physically for people. So that can be a challenge.
Alan, are you seeing like that some of the independent living facilities, they look maybe more like assisted living of old?
Absolutely,
Mhm,
absolutely. And my mother-in-law down in Plainfield, she often tells me, there are people that shouldn't be here. So she is seeing it too. And again, we're not being judgmental about it. I'm sure that if I need care in the future, I know I'm going to want to stay at home like everybody
Yes.
else. I probably will not go willing.
So if they have kind of an in-house caregiving service, they can help with personal care and whatnot. The well spouse would perhaps there'd be a larger active senior group to do social activities with. I would think perhaps in an independent.
Correct.
sector.
And that's often presented to us by a person saying, I want to go to a community where people aren't old. That's another kind of humorous statement, because generally I would say that the average age of the working communities that we're around is probably 85 or greater. So, but for a individual who is high functioning and still physically active, maybe driving, it can be actually a greater challenge for the well spouse versus the spouse that needs care.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, talking about independent and assisted, long-term care insurance will help with the assisted. Is that?
That is correct. While we're not experts on policies, generally, if a policy will pay, you need to have or need assistance with 2 activities of daily living, or ADLs. And from our experience, that's generally when policies will pay, is if you need care. So it'll pay on the spouse that needs assistance. Of course, it won't pay on the spouse that's truly independent. Another challenge I would say is on the memory care side. That may be the greatest challenge. When the well spouse is caring for a spouse that has moderate to advanced dementia, again, the social well-being of the well spouse, it can be difficult. Memory communities also can be physically and cognitively, you'll see a lot of advanced residents there. And I think for a well spouse, and actually I'm thinking of one right now that we're working with, and this is the challenge I've mentioned to that well spouse, I think you would struggle being in a dementia only community. Again, his objective was, I want to be together with my wife. We've thrown out some options. We've not toured a memory community yet, but I've thrown that out because you don't want people to be surprised. It's about, what we're trying to do is educate people to make the best decision possible.
Now there's some facilities out there that there's like an assisted living memory care combo on the same property.
Correct.
I'm seeing more and more of those. Yeah.
Right. And so those assisted living communities with memory, and most of the building that's gone on in the last 2 to 3 years have been primarily assisted living with memory. But again, I think for a well spouse, who actually the gentleman I'm thinking of drives and he still teaches at Northwestern University.
Wow.
I think him living in an assisted living community with his wife, even though the memory community is there, I think is going to be a social challenge for him.
Yeah, and I can see that. All of us are familiar with memory cares, and maybe our audience, some of them are not familiar. But as you were saying, this could be the challenge for the well spouse.
Right.
Because of the restrictiveness of the memory care, the people that have cognitive dysfunction, need security. So and even though these models of memory care have been wonderfully designed these days to allow people to be able to wander, to be able to be as free as they possibly can be, they're still restrictive from going out. So that would create maybe even a safety issue for for the cognitive other cognitive people, having somebody going in and out all the time.
Absolutely, that's a good point. Hadn't thought about that.
So the third, and that brings us to the third option, huh?
Yeah, so again, this gentleman that I had made reference to, he happens to be, actually, he and his wife are both in their early to mid 70s. So one of the first things that we had thought about is a continuing care retirement community. Some people know it as a buy-in. Generally, the CCRCs or the buy-ins bend the curve, is what I say, on the age. Generally find people that are younger, but they also generally have greater financial ability. And so that buy-in amount, which can be a barrier to a lot of people, generally people who are going that direction are planning farther ahead. They're looking for a place where they can go in independently and age in place and not be kicked out for either care purposes or financial reasons. And so I guess in summary, with all these different options, that's the value of us at Oasis Senior Advisors, is we talk to everybody about what your options are. And again, in this case of this gentleman, we're not trying to talk him out of going with his wife, but there are times when families find on their own that, my goal was to go with my spouse, but you know what, it's just not going to work out, so I'm going to place my spouse. And of course, with those kind of situations, we're also trying to help people find a community that can do the care and meet the family's goals, but be close. Because here we are going into fall and now winter. And yesterday I spoke to a lady who made a decision for a community, and she said, you know what, when winter's here, I just don't want to drive, 15 miles. So all those aspects of what a family's goals and objectives are around care for their family, we talk and we address all of those so that you can make the most informed decision possible.
Could you perhaps share kind of like what your process is from the first intake call through to placement?
Yeah. Generally, a person will call us or we will call them. We probably spend a couple hours on the phone and we get to know your story. We have a software program, so we'll gather information about the person who's calling. We gather information about the person who needs the care or the couple that needs the care, so we're gathering activities of daily living. We ask about your financial information if you're willing to share. We look at geography, where do you want to live, and we build this profile. Then we use that profile to match to communities in our database. What makes Oasis unique is our database of communities. We load in a lot of information about the community's pricing, amenities, ADLs, activities of daily living are the most important thing, and probably financial. And we only identify 2 to 3 communities. Beware, if you go on the internet, you're likely to sign up for a service that you probably don't want. We don't share your contact information, which a lot of people like. And then we also will schedule tours and tour with you to help you ask the right questions. So we're a very personal service. And our goal is to make sure, again, when you make a decision, you make the most informed decision possible.
So after you go on the tour, it would seem that you guys then are a great sounding board to them. They have observed and talked to folks, and then they'll come back and ask you kind of follow-up questions on what they're seeing.
Yeah, another part of our service that we get tremendous feedback on is after we tour, we'll write up a tour summary. And that allows a couple of things. As you're touring, you don't have to write notes. You can if you want, but we're taking notes so that you can really focus on the conversation and the visual aspects of the community. So we send that tour summary out, and people really value that. Occasionally, people will say, we can't decide, what do you think we should do? And we will not make a decision for you, because what we think is valuable or of interest is often not the same for the clients we're working with. So my answer to that is always, we should either tour again, we need to ask different questions or better questions, or maybe you take it off the list if you're not sure. One additional thing, if you've ever bought a car, they always tell you, don't get emotional, you'll pay more. This is an emotional buy, so to speak. If you get a bad feeling about a community, if it didn't smell right, if you don't like the people we were talking to, that may be an indication. And even for us males, I tell everybody, this is a feel. If you don't feel good, we take a different step or we drop the community.
One of the things you just mentioned before, and I wanted to get back into that in just a second. One of the reasons to use a service like Alan's Oasis Senior Living Advisors, he had mentioned going on the internet. And here's the reason why. If you go on the internet to some of the services out there, they will blast out to all communities, and you will be inundated with phone calls and salespeople.
Absolutely.
So this is why, to take the personal touch of Alan's service, they help guide you through that. They know all the facilities, and as they get to know you, they'll know your needs, and they'll only provide the best of what those needs might match.
Correct.
So this sort of leads us, it segues into our second topic.
Mhm.
And so that's about Medicaid care and housing options, because often the same couples as well as individuals need a Medicaid pathway.
Correct. So if we kind of go back to that whole couple situation in a CCRC, most continuing care retirement communities are buy-ins. If you can afford the upfront expense and pay that monthly fee, they'll never kick you out, even if you spend all your assets. That's a great thing. But what if you don't have that big upfront expense? In the state of Illinois, there are basically two Medicaid pathways if you're going to choose a community or a facility. There's something called supportive living in the state of Illinois, and then there is skilled nursing. We are big fans of supportive living, and it's fairly unique in the United States. There might be a couple other states that have supportive living, but the concept of supportive living in very layman's terms, because this all happened before I got into this business, is to keep people who are high functioning but maybe were short on income, maybe they only had their Social Security, but to keep them out of skilled nursing. Back in the 80s, you saw a lot of highly independent people in skilled nursing simply because they didn't have the assets. So the state of Illinois created supportive living. It's apartment style living. You get 3 meals a day. They have caregivers on site. So as your condition advances, if you need more physical care, whether it be dressing, showering, etc., caregivers will come into your apartment. They also offer transportation options, doctors, hygienists. They'll have professionals come into the community, and it's a much more social atmosphere. I'm a big fan of supportive living for that reason. And so that's one option. The limits of supportive living, though, are generally around dementia. So if you have a mild dementia diagnosis, you potentially can go into supportive living. But if you wander, if you come out of your apartment, you don't know where you're at, if you have aggressive behaviors, that'll be, discharge. And if that's the case, then skilled nursing is probably the direction that you'll go. I think I had mentioned to you that, I would imagine right now in skilled nursing communities, there are probably individuals that might function better and socially by going into supportive living. And so if you have a loved one who's in skilled nursing, but they're up and walking and they're physically in good shape and they are aware of their surroundings, supportive living might be a better option than skilled nursing.
So I want to ask you, how long does it take to get into a Medicaid facility?
Our experience for the area that we cover, which is Naperville, about a surrounding 20-25 mile radius, there can be a short wait list on some of these supportive living communities, but we can find available apartments in in some of the locations. So it really depends on the time and the day.
Sure.
I think the future is that the wait lists at supportive living communities will probably be longer as our population ages. I think we're all aware that the baby boomer generation, a lot of them don't have savings. I heard a study a couple months ago where I think it was 47% of baby boomers had not saved for retirement. I don't know exactly what that means. That was what was on the news report, but chances are that means there'll be a greater demand on Medicaid for supportive living and skilled nursing. I'm sure you guys probably have, experience with that.
And so what if I only have Social Security income and I'm independent?
Yeah, that would be without knowing all your details, but we would learn that over a phone conversation. Supportive living could be an option. And actually, if you're independent and it's not a crisis, we normally tell people to fill out the application to go on the wait list. And in many cases, it doesn't cost anything to go on the wait list. You fill out a pre-application. And then when an apartment becomes available, the community will call you. And if you choose to bypass it, most places they'll give you a couple of calls over a period of time. If you decline a couple of times, sometimes they'll drop you off, but they're pretty flexible on calling.
Now, are there so you've kind of brought up, there are some, from your observation, people that are at skilled nursing facilities right now that could potentially make that move, and their social engagement would be higher, et cetera.
That's what I'm saying. It might be a little controversial, but again, so supportive living is apartment style living. You have to be 65, in most cases, 65 plus. There are a couple of communities that are 22 to 65. And so, as we talk to people on the phone, whether it be an hour or an hour and a half or 2 hours, we would be able to get a really good idea of their situation and say, you know what, it's worth a tour. Let's go talk. Let's go see. If someone's in a condition where it's a gray area, like we believe they're on the verge of needing the next level of care, we'll tell that to our clients or our families and say, you know what, we're not sure, but what we would recommend is let's go tour, see if you like it, and then let's schedule an assessment. And sometimes it's up to the community to decide, you know what, this person, this condition is too advanced. At least you would then know what you're working with. Your only option might be skilled nursing. And the type of person I am, I prefer to invest time to know for sure. I don't want to miss out on an opportunity. And generally, I find that most of our clients want to go that direction as well. If you tell them up front, we're not sure it's gray, but let's go figure it out, they're willing. Nobody likes surprises.
That's right. And everybody likes those options.
Yeah.
And they also like experts to help them along. And that's where you guys come in.
Yeah, thank you.
Something that you had just mentioned, 22 to 65. Can you cover that for a second? The age limit, because they kind of threw me for a loop.
Yeah. There are occasions where we get calls where someone is under 65. And so the supportive living communities, there's one in Aurora and Huntley. I'm probably thinking they're in the Chicagoland area. There may be, three or four of them. And I remember a lady when we first started about 4 or 5 years ago, and she was living in a skilled nursing community in Naperville and had been there. Ultimately, before she moved, she was there for about a year and totally functioning. She was happy there, and we continued to meet with her. And probably 6 months into it, and we were telling her about supportive living. I think at the time she was like 63 because she was just a couple years short of 65. So anyway, the longer we spoke to her over these months and months, she decided on her own that this really wasn't the best place for her. And to make a long story short, the community that we brought up to her was in McHenry, and she had transportation challenges. She had a niece who she was dependent on to drive her, but ultimately they did take her up to that community. They did an assessment. They found that she would be eligible for that supportive living community, and she went on the wait list. And we continued to follow up with her because we kind of became friends. And I think after about 3 more months, an apartment became available and she moved up there, and she was quite happy with that. So I guess one of my points to this is, we will work with you, whether it's 2 or 3 days turnaround, or we have clients who have called us back a year ago. As a matter of fact, I showed you a text message, somebody that called us a year ago. The condition is now advanced and they want me to call again. So we're more than happy to do that.
Well, we've ran out of time again. So how about, before we break away, share your contact information in case someone wanted to learn more about Oasis Senior Advisors.
So Oasis Senior Advisors, you can call Alan or Leanne, and our number is 630-360-1041. Again, 630-360-1041. If you want to look on the internet, you can Google Oasis Naperville, Illinois, and I'm sure our website will come up. We're very proud of the specific feedback that our past clients have provided. It's humbling and it's very detailed. We know that trust is important, and so give us a call, look at the comments on the website, and we'd be happy to help you in any way.
Thank you so much, Alan.
Thanks for having me.